Good morning, students. Today we will read the chapter 2 of the novel Because of Winn Dixie. Okay, let's begin. That summer, I found a Winn Dixie was also the summer me, and the preachers moved to Nimoi, Florida, so he could be a new preacher at Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. My dad is a good preacher and a nice man, but sometimes it's hard for me to think about him as my dad because he spends so much time preaching or thinking about preaching or getting ready to preach. And so in my mind, I think him as the preacher. Before I was born, he was a missionary in India. That is how I got my first name, but he calls me by my second name, Opal, because that was his mother's name and he loved her a lot. Anyway, while me and Winn Dixie walked home, I told him how I got my name and I told him how I had just moved to New York. I also told him the preachers and he was a good man, even if he was too distracted with the sermons and prayers and suffering people to go to a grocery shopping. But you know what? I told Winn Dixie, you are suffering dog. So maybe he will take you to the right away. Maybe he will let me keep you. Winn Dixie looked up at me and wagged his tail. He was a kind of lemming, like something was wrong with one of his legs. And I have to admit the stuck, but he was an ugly dog. But already I loved him with all my heart. When he got to a friendly corner trailer park, I told Winn Dixie that he had to behave right and be quiet because this was an adult trailer park and the only reason I got to live in it was because the preachers was a preachers and I was a good, quiet kid. I was what the friendly corner trailer park manager, Mr. Alfred, called an exceptions, and I told Winn Dixie he had to act like exceptions too. Especially, I told him not to pick any fights with Mr. Alfred's cat or Mrs. Devilier's little zippy zoggy dog, Samuel. Winn Dixie looked up at me while I was telling him everything, and I swear he understood. Sit, I told him. When he got to my trailer, he sat right down. He had a good manners. Stay here, I told him. I will be right back. The preacher was sitting in the living room working. At the little fold-out table, he had the papers spread all around him and he was rubbing his nose, which always means he is thinking hard. Daddy, I said. He said back, Daddy, do you know how you always tell me that we should help those less fortunate than ourselves? He said. He rubbed his nose and looked around at his papers. Well, I said, I found a less fortune at the grocery store. Is that right? He said. Yes, sir. I told him. I started at the preacher's really hard. Sometimes he reminded me of the turtle hiding inside its shell, in there thinking about things and not ever sticking his head out into the world. Daddy, I was wondering, could this less fortune could be stay with us for a while? Finally, the preacher looked up at me. Opal, he said, what are you talking about? I found a dog, I told him, and I want to keep him. No dogs, the preacher said. We have talked about this before. You don't need a dog. I know it. I said, I know I don't need a dog, but this dog needs me. Look, I said. I went to the trailer's door and hollered, Winn Dixie. Winn Dixie's ears shot up in the air and he grinned and sneezed, and then he came limping up the steps and into the trailers and put his head right in the preacher's lap, right on the top of the pile of the papers. The preacher looked at Winn Dixie. He looked at his ribs and his matted up fur and the places where he was a blade. The preacher's nose wrinkled up. Like I said, the dog smelled pretty bad. Winn Dixie looked up at the preacher. He pulled back his lips and showed the preacher all of his crooked yellow teeth, wagged his tail, and knocked some of the preacher's paper off the table. Then he sneezed, and some more paper fluttered to the floor. What did you call this dog? The preacher asked Winn Dixie. I whispered. I was afraid to say anything too loud. I could see that Winn Dixie was having a good effect on the preacher. He was making him poke his head out of his shell. Well, said the preacher, he's a story if I have ever seen one. He put down his pencil and scratched Winn Dixie's behind the ear. And the less fortune too, that's for sure. Are you looking for a home? The preacher asked, soft to Winn Dixie. Winn Dixie wagged his tail. Well, the preacher said, I guess you have found the one. So students, this is the end of the chapter 2. We will continue the chapter 3 on the next day. Thank you.